CSC Show Control Tutorial 7B MIDI cues. So now let's take a look at our actual program and how we're going to actually send MIDI. So go up to the MIDI menu item and choose Output Setup. Now in the LE version of CSC Show Control, which I'm using here, I only get to use one MIDI device. So I have to select that down here. Currently I have loopy internal MIDI selected because I'm going to be showing you stuff on the same computer. So this is actually an internal virtual MIDI cable that will connect my CSC Show Control program to other programs that are running on the same computer. If I was in the theater, I would probably be using my audio box USB. So I would have my Show Control computer with my audio box. Then I'd actually have a MIDI cable, 5-pin MIDI cable, connecting my audio box to my light board, and then the light board has a MIDI out on it or through, and I can connect that to my laptop that is running my slides. So I'd be able to synchronize my audio cues with my light board with my laptop that's running slides for me. But I'm going to again go back and just have this as loopy internal MIDI as far as the selection goes. When I'm communicating with different devices, I'm going to use different channels to communicate with. MIDI uses 16 different channels, so there's plenty of room for it to communicate to multiple devices. And in this case here, I'm going to have my light desk as communicating on MIDI channel 1. I could put any other devices that I want in here and I can label them. Might want to put channel 2, could be mixer, could be communicating with my mixer. And just for the heck of it down here, channel 16, I'm going to say PowerPoint laptop. Alright, because I'm going to be issuing these commands on different channels depending upon what device I'm sending commands to. And again, you need to have your manuals for your devices to see what commands that they can understand. One or two other items on here. On notes, we can look at the commands as being decimals. So if you remember the chart that we had up, it went from 0 to 127, so we can look at them as being numbers, or we can look at the commands as actually being notes. C-1 all the way up to C9 and etc. So note values. So it's up to you preference-wise which you would like to see. If there's a check in this checkbox, when we do the commands, it's going to display them as note values. C-1, C#-1, etc. If we uncheck this, then it's going to display it as decimal commands like 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 127, etc. So I'm going to leave that unchecked for the time being. PC0 stands for Program Change 0. Again, even though MIDI was fairly standard, there were some manufacturers that looked at the program change information, which told the keyboard what sound to go to. Some of the manufacturers numbered those program changes from 0 to 127. Some of the manufacturers labeled them as 1 to 128. So, program change 0 up here means that we're going to be numbering our program changes from 0 to 127. If I uncheck that, now we're going to be using 1 to 128 as our decimal values. Again, it depends on your hardware or software on how it's going to understand that. Keep that in mind. If I don't check this and I send a program change 1, my hardware may see that as the program change 0. So you can see where there might be some confusion that might come in there. So make sure you understand, are you working with program change 0 to 127 or 1 to 128? That will help alleviate some confusion, especially when you're running PowerPoint slides. All right, enough said. We've kind of got this set up, ready to go. I'm not going to talk too much about the specific mixer control stuff because that's a little bit more advanced, but we'll just use our lighting desk as a for instance here as far as what we're going to do. Now my next step is going to be issuing a MIDI command. So let's go back here to scene 1 because I can have a MIDI command happening along with my audio command up here. So say I want to tell my light board to go to the next cue so that it can bring up the lighting for scene 1. So I bring up my MIDI command box, which looks like that. Now, since we labeled that light desk, you can see here are our choices, and you can see light desk up there, and that's going to be my choice. Then the next thing I have to decide, and I want to make sure I'm on port A, what command. So I'm going to use a note on command here. So back in our layout box, we chose to have notes displayed. So my value 1 here is going to be my note that I'm choosing. So notice it says C-2 through G8 as far as what I can select here. Already we kind of have a discrepancy because remember the note chart, C-1. So we know this is going to be the lowest MIDI note there. This value over here is what we call the velocity. When you're playing an electronic keyboard, it senses how hard you hit the key. Now it really doesn't sense pressure, it just senses by speed. The harder I hit the key, the faster that key was depressed. So that's why it's referred to as velocity. So in order to get this command to work, I need to have some velocity value, and I can choose anything from 0 to 127. There's our numbering scheme. We don't want to choose 0 because that would be 0 velocity, which basically means we didn't press the key down. Let's just choose something generic like 100 here. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to type in a comment here, lightboard, go, cue. So now when my MIDI instruction comes up here, it will have this comment in place. Lightboard, go, cue. So that helps me identify what this MIDI command is all about here. Let me just delete that for a minute. And if I don't put anything in the comment, it's going to put in this information. Note on C-2. Now it does include light desk, so I do get that piece of information since I had that labeled. So again, you decide what you want to do. If you want to leave that as C-2 light desk, or how you would like it to be. Now just to show you how this changes over, I'm going to get rid of that cue for a moment. Let's go back to our MIDI output setup, and I'm going to uncheck note box up here for the lighting desk and say accept. Now you're going to notice that when I open my MIDI command box and I'm talking about light desk and a note on, note off, notice all of a sudden now value 1, now I'm using decimals instead of note names. So I could choose note 0, which would be the lowest note, which would be either C-1 or C-2, depending upon your manufacturer. And I'm still going to leave a velocity in of 100. And I could add that cue. Notice that it says here, note on 0. So it's giving me the decimal value for that note and not the actual note name like C-1. So you do have some options as far as what you want to do there. And again, if I don't remember what 0 is, I could put in the comments field here, lightboard, go, cue. So when I enter that here, it's going to say lightboard, go, cue. So I know what that's all about. Now, one of the programs that I like to use a lot of times so I can figure out errors in MIDI code or figure out why the MIDI is not communicating the way I expect it to communicate is a program called Midi aux. And I'm going to bring that up now. So right now, this program is going to display any MIDI signals or MIDI commands that I'm sending from my show control software. And I can audition this command by simply highlighting it and then pressing over here. And there we have the command come up. Now, on this input here, it's currently giving me hexadecimal values. So first piece of information over here, the 90. The The 9 represents a note on command. The 0 represents that this command is being sent over MIDI channel number 1. Remember how we assigned lightboard to channel 1? So it's a note on command on MIDI channel 1. The next two pieces of information are my actual note and velocity. So it's the lowest note, it's decimal number 0, in this case it's hexadecimal 00, and the velocity is 64. Now, you're probably confused and you're saying, wait a minute, wasn't the velocity 100? Yes, but don't forget, we're displaying hexadecimal here. So I can right click here and say, display decimal. Oh, there we are. It's note 0 and it's at a velocity of 100. Here, it basically gives me the layman's interpretation. This is a MIDI command being sent on channel 1. It's a note on command and it's a C-1. And then we just know that the velocity is 100 over here. Now, we're going to go back over here. Caution. Whenever you use a note on commands to trigger something, you need to follow it with a note off command for the exact same note. Because the computer or light desk or whatever receiving this command, you just send a command to that software or hardware saying, I want C-1 to come on with a velocity of 100. If you want to send this command again, so say we're using this command to trigger a go command on a light board, repeatedly go, next cue, go, next cue, go, next cue, go, next cue, we need to turn the note off before we can send the note on command. Because if you try to send the note on command again, the light board's listening and saying, well, you can't send the note on command, that's already on. Think of it this way. I use my finger and I turn that note on by pressing down the key on the keyboard. Before I can play that note again or send that signal, I need to pick up my finger from that key on the keyboard, so I need to turn it off. Then I can press that key down again and send that go signal. So you always want to follow a note on command with a note off command. And we can actually do it inside of the same cue here. They would be instantaneous. Just make sure your on command is first. So I'm going to do light desk. This time I'm going to select note off. Same note. We can leave it at a value of 100. It's not going to matter because there won't be any really velocity because we're shutting the note off. And I'm going to say up here, reset, go, and say plus. So now it's sending reset go. I can highlight this and send that command. And notice that now this becomes a note off command. So that's exactly what we wanted. It's note 0. And even though we sent out a velocity of 100, it just ignored that. It's like, wait, you're turning a note off. There is no velocity for this. It's going off, so it's just a velocity 0. So on channel 1, we're sending a note off command, and it's a C-1, the lowest note. Again, I hope this doesn't get too complicated for you, but just have to make sure you keep track of what notes you're using for what so that things don't get confused. And that's basically how you would do it. And you can see the commands on here. Now, just to give you a for instance too, let's go back and take a look at hexadecimal code here. I'm going to say display hex. Say we were using channel 16 here to send something to my PowerPoint computer. And on channel 16, I'm going to do a note on command. And I could use the same note because I'm using different channels. So it could be a note value 0. Let's use something different. Let's say note 60. And with a velocity of 100. And I'm just going to say PowerPoint go slide 1. And put that in there. Or it could be just the PowerPoint go if you're using it to press the space bar on that computer. I can highlight this and I can send it. Notice the command up here. Now this changed to 9F. That's because it's a note on command, but it's being sent over channel 16. And in the translation here it says note on channel 16. That's the hexadecimal for that. Note 60 is hexadecimal 3C. And velocity of 100 is hexadecimal 64. Let's right click and do decimal. There's our note 60 at a velocity of 100. Okay. Channel 16, note on, the note is C4. So you can see how the different commands come through when you actually do MIDI on there. So I wanted to give you an example of actually using CSC Show Control to control a lighting program. So here we go. So I have my cue list here. The first 4 cues on here, Q1, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are just going to activate a go command on a cue list on my lighting program. As I expand this, you can see up here cue list 1, and it shows that I have 2 cues in there. If I click on here, the cue list go command is a note 20 at a value of 100, and then of course, as I mentioned, I have to reset this, so now it's a note off command, note 20, and you have to do that in order to proceed through here. So here's my lighting program, and it's up and ready to run. Here's my cue list. What I've done is I have assigned this particular key to this go command over here. So when this sends that note 20 at a velocity of 100, it's actually going to activate this key and move us forward in the lighting cue. So I'm going to start my lighting cues out. So I'm Q1, Q2 is up on deck. Now I'm just going to go over here to my show control program and fire, and you'll see that it does advance to the next cue. So it's actually activating this button right here. Okay, next cue, and my scene 4 cue. So I'm using the same command over and over, but as I mentioned, you have to make sure that you use a note off command in order to use that command over and over. I'm just going to stop my cue list here from operating. Don't forget, you can have other information in here. You can have an audio cue running. You can be sending another MIDI cue to another device, maybe to do PowerPoint slides. So this is just a real quick way of showing you how I put this together and how it runs. Now, the next 4 cues on here, buttons 1, 2, 3, and the blackout button, I used different notes for these because I'm activating buttons. So each button would have to be assigned a different note. And I assigned C2, C-2, D2, and D-2. From a numerical standpoint, this would be note 0, note 1, note 2, and then note 3. And again, if I expand on here and click on the button Q1, you'll see button 1, and if I highlight this, you'll see that it's note 0 at a value of 100, and of course I have to turn that off, so we have a note off command, note 0. And then the second one here, button 2, would be a different note. So if I highlight that, you can see it's note 1 at 100. If I go to 3, you can see that this is, highlight this, it's note 2 at 100, and so on. So let's just take a look at how I used this. I'm going to slide over here. I have some buttons that I can use, and we call this particular software that I'm using, we call this the solo frame, so you can only activate one button at a time. Or up and running. So I'm going to fire my first button cue here, and you're going to see that button 1 is depressed. And if I bring up actually my lighting scenario here, you'll see that I actually have different lights going on and off with that button 1. We have the first row comes on. Now go button 2, next command, highlighted, and go button 2, and you see our lights are changing. Button 3, now we're button 3, and we have different lights. And now I'm going to jump over here to my blackout button and activate that. So the blackout button activates and all the lights turn off. Now another option that you have here in these 4 commands here, button 1, 2, 3, and blackout, I'm using note on and off commands. But I just wanted to show you there are other possibilities. I'm going to just click this and turn it off for the moment. I activated buttons 5, 6, and 7 by using program change commands. And those are the commands that you would send to electronic musical instrument to change the sound. But you can use these for buttons too. The advantage is you don't have to do a note off command, okay? As long as you're not trying to send the same program change command in a row. So I'm sending program change 1, and program change 2, program change 3. I can't send 2 program change 3s in a row, which I probably wouldn't want to do because it's activating the same button. So then you can jump around with this. You can do 2, 3, 2, 3, 1. You can jump around, and I can actually show you that as we do that. Let me just shrink this up and we'll take a look. We're still active, so we'll look at buttons 5, 6, and 7. And you'll see that button 5 is now depressed. Now button 6 is working. Now button 7. And I can jump back here and do button 6 again. And again, I'm just using now button 5. I'm using program change commands there to actually jump to these buttons. So that's another way that you can actually use the MIDI to do that. Hopefully this gives you a real world idea of how this would be put to use then and what the commands look like.